And welcome into this week's edition of The Locker Room with Gerhard Mathangani. I'm Chase Robinson. Great show lined up for you today. We're going to talk some Gadsden State basketball, and of course we'll have all kinds of college football talk, so let's go ahead and dive right into it. The Alabama Crimson Tide, big win on the road at Texas A&M last week.
For the second time in the last 3 weeks, they went into an opponent ranked in the top 10 and came out with a win. Both times really convincingly. I know the score on the outside was what it was, but to me it felt like a 59-13 game. It was like a little fluky play on special teams, some mishaps there. Texas A&M, they kind of came back towards the end, but I'll tell you what, it's another dominating performance by Alabama, and I'll tell you what, this is the kind of Alabama team that everybody fears, that one-loss team that plays hungry, that plays solid, and that's exactly what they did in College Station.
Another big game for them this week, a rivalry game for Alabama. Tennessee coming to town. What's that going to bring?
You know, it's the third Saturday in October, big rivalry game. It hardly falls on the third Saturday in October anymore just because of the way the conference lays out. But Tennessee is a team that's improving, but not there yet. And Alabama is a team that's kind of where they want to be, but not there yet. I just think there's too much of a disparity between where the Tide are and where the Vols are right now. They will make Josh Dobbs throw some interceptions just like they did last week with Kyle Allen. I just think that Alabama is way too solid right now.
What's it going to take for Alabama to get back to those national championship years just a few years ago?
I think they're close. I think they're already pretty close. I think it's a situation they need to clean up special teams because they haven't played a team yet that can kill them in special teams, but they've played just bad enough to where it becomes a tiny bit of a concern. They did it. They showed it in the opening game, and they showed it again last week, and they showed it definitely against Ole Miss. So I think that if they can clean up some of the smaller things, but they can win while doing it, they'll be just fine.
And here's Coach Nick Saban, what he had to say this week as he gets ready for Tennessee.
To me, the focus needs to be on how do you stay locked in and how do you stay focused in the game regardless of the circumstance and the situation that you're in and be able to execute. So that's really what we're trying to get accomplished here this week.
Alabama, Tennessee, you can catch that one 2:30 over on CBS. Now Auburn, they had their first conference win last Thursday night against Kentucky. Definitely a big win for them.
They needed it. They needed a big SEC road win. That was a tough place to play on national television on a Thursday night. Had about 10 and 11 days to prepare for it with the off week of the week before. I think one of the things they now solidified is their quarterback in Sean White moving forward. For the first time, really in the last 4 weeks, we don't have a quarterback controversy, so to speak. And Sean White, he's not overly spectacular, but he plays well enough. And that's really all you need at this point. It's just good enough. They're getting some other playmakers going. It's a good win for them on the road as they get ready for Arkansas this week.
Like you mentioned, Arkansas this week. What's it going to take for them to beat them?
Arkansas is a much tougher place to play than Lexington. Of course, over in Kentucky, they have one eye on basketball. I have Big Blue Madness the night afterwards. Arkansas is a team that's just hungry enough. And where I think the big thing is the running game for Arkansas. They are run heavy. They're kind of like LSU. They like to run 60 to 70% of the time. Auburn right now ranks 13th in the SEC, number 101 in the country against the rush. I think that's exactly where Arkansas can beat them if they come late in the game and they need to drain some clock. If they just keep running with Alex Collins, Auburn's in trouble.
And Gus Malzahn spoke to the media as well this week as they get ready for Arkansas.
We go on the road this week against a good Arkansas team. I really feel like their record is deceiving. Their schedule they've played is a very good schedule. A lot of top 20 teams, and they've competed very well. Had a chance to win. A few of those could have went either way. Again,
Auburn and Arkansas this Saturday. The JSU Gamecocks back on the road with another conference game in Austin Peay.
Yeah, it's another team that it's not very good. You know, they have been outscored 296. I'm lying to you not. Outscored this year 296 to 81. This team's not very good. They're 0-7 and 0-4. But one of the things that Jacksonville State head coach John Gross likes to say is we play nameless, faceless opponents. And the reason why he says that is for games like this. The number one team in the country has no business losing a game like this. If they can play like last week and did against Tennessee Tech, they'll be just fine.
JSU still looking for the playoffs. There's a good chance they could go far in the playoffs. What's it going to take for them to be able to continue this streak?
I think they need to play exactly the way they're playing right now. They're playing so solidly on both offense and defense. Special teams is coming together. Just like we talked about with Alabama. they're so close to their peak form, and their peak form's good enough for a national championship. Jacksonville State's in the same boat. Their peak form is good enough for a national championship. They just need to keep playing at that level, sustaining it, getting better a little bit by a little bit. They haven't been over the board terrible. They haven't been over the board great, but they've just been reaching towards that greatness every single week, and I think it's exactly what coaches want.
And here's John Gross in this week's press conference.
They played some games where, in spurts they played really good, and then the Vandy, score was close early in the first half, and they've hung in there with a lot of guys. So, like I said, the gap's a lot closer. They're getting better players in. I think the facilities has really helped them in recruiting, so they're getting a bigger, stronger, faster player in, and they're running the ball really well offensively right now. So, we got to go take care of business. It's not a game where you can look past it for sure.
Again, Jacksonville State takes on Austin Peay this Saturday. Stay with us here on The Locker Room. We're going to talk some Gadsden State basketball next. Vicky Shaddricks visits with the head coach, Todd Ginn, right here on The Locker Room.
And welcome back to The Locker Room. We come to you now from the Cardinal Room on the campus of Gadsden State Community College, joined now by Gadsden State head basketball coach Todd Ginn, who is entering his 8th season as head coach here of the Cardinals. Coach, it's hard to believe it's already been that many years since you took over this job. Is the shoe fitting pretty good by now?
It's going well. I'm used to it by now, and it's a lot of fun.
Let's talk about your team. Practice is underway. You open your season November the 7th against a very good team, Georgia Highlands, who finished second in the nation last year. So you got a really tough test right off the bat. I know you lost some key players from last year's team. You've got some good young guys coming in this year. Talk about the makeup of the team.
Well, last year, you said it. Georgia Highlands is a really good team, finished second. And we were really good last year. Finished second and had a chance to go out to Hutchinson, which is rare. But that team's gone, and this team got a lot of new faces, but really good team, got a lot of potential. As athletic as we've been since I've been here, actually. But how's that gonna tie into the team concept? Right now, practice is going really well, so hopefully they'll all buy in, and we'll be pretty good.
One of the interesting things about your roster, you've got at least half a dozen or so local kids on your roster, which is something you normally do have here at Gadsden State. I'm sure that's by design. You playing at Alexandria and having so much success there, playing here, and your dad playing here. Talk about the local angle and how that comes into play with you regarding recruiting.
Well, I still teach at Alexandria. I still teach part-time, and everybody around here knows that. So as far as recruiting, I love that aspect of what I do, but it's so much easier when you've got players that can play around this area, and I try to make a living off of those guys. I try to find kids that are good basketball players, but are also good team guys and good character guys, because I'm not here every day, and they have to go to class, they have to do what they need to do, and luckily we have some local talent that fits into our system really well. We run up and down the court, so it makes some of our local guys, even though they're smaller, we don't have a whole lot of size in this area, and you keep up with that kind of stuff, but not a whole lot of size, but we make up for it with heart and the way we play the game. So we sprinkle in a little talent out of Birmingham, and we end up doing pretty good. But the local guys are where we hang our hat on those guys, and they've been really successful here.
Let's talk about a few of those local kids. First of all, you've got a young man by the name of Chris English, who folks know very well from his days at Weaver. He is now a sophomore going into this season. He's a point guard for you, projected to be a starter for you. I know personally Chris has worked real hard in the offseason. Talk about what kind of year you expect out of him.
Well, Chris, he had the Jones fracture last year, and it set him back a little bit. And usually when something like that happens, it was a bad situation. We have a 20% rule. If you play over 20% of your games, you can't get a medical red shirt. And Chris actually got hurt in game number 7, which was one game over the 20% rule, which hurt us, tremendously. But it gave our guys a chance, and Chris a chance, to learn what we were doing. And we got him back, late in the year last year, and he did really well. And this year I'm just looking for him to lead. He is an extremely hard worker, just gets after it every day. And we've got some other good guys that, I say he's a projected starter, but we got we got two guys right behind him that are, and he knows it, and he knows that he's got to get after it every day. But Chris, as far as working, you're not going to find a harder worker and a good kid.
Another local kid who is, again, kind of in the projected starter category for you is the Wise kid out of Gaston City. I think he's a guy you're hoping to put up some points for you this year.
Yes, Tevin Wise, tremendous scorer. It's about 6'2", 6'3", got a great body on him, and just a great scorer. Worked extremely hard. Last year, one of Tevin's biggest things was, Tevin, you got to get in shape to play our style of ball. Worked extremely hard last year, got in shape, and I look for him to, I don't mind putting pressure on these guys. I look for him to lead us in scoring, and I look for him to have a really, really good year.
Another kid, we don't have time to talk about all of them, but another one I want to talk to you about because folks will recognize Jalen Hill from days at White Plains. He's been out of high school for a couple of years, but I think you told me earlier today that sometimes that's a good kid for you to get in your program, a kid maybe who's been out of school and then comes back and still has eligibility.
Right. Well, there's two types of kids there that I look at coming out of school early. Some – in college, people don't realize, they say, why didn't coach get this kid or why didn't he offer that kid? Well, it all depends on, especially here and even more on a 4-year scale, what do you have coming back? What needs do you need to fill? And Jalen kind of fell coming out of high school when he graduated. He fell in one of those years where we had his position filled. And but I always love coming back to those guys because Jalen is hungry. He is a very hard worker. Great kid. Going to be a really good player. It's not that his talent wasn't there when it was time to come out. He had just played down low his whole time at White Plains, which is what happens around here. I'm from, when I was at Alexandria, we're playing 6'2" guys in the post. I understand that. You put your guys that can score down there and you play. Well, Coach Randall at White Plains did that with Jalen. Well, to play on our level, he's now got to develop into more of a guard. Matter of fact, not more of, he's going to have to be a guard. And he's worked really, really hard. He can handle the ball, got the longest arms I think I've ever seen, and is really, really catching on. Very, very smart kid, and really going to be a vital part of our team this time.
And finally, Coach, I mentioned you're starting your 8th season here at Gadsden State. I know there are some unique challenges coaching at a junior college. Talk about what are some of your biggest obstacles each year to keep this program consistently winning? Well,
the biggest obstacle I think is, and to me, is to have good people around you. Have good coaches. Both of my brothers help me. Coach Norman helps me. We've got Coach Glenn Norman helps, and Scott and Will both come up and help. We've got a great weight program. We work extremely hard, and that's the biggest challenge, I think. A lot of junior college guys, I think, go out and get talent. And, that's the way college in general, I think, does that now. You got to win, you got to win, you got to win, or you're going to get fired. Well, we do it a little bit different. We go out and get good kids. Now, I'm going to get fooled sometimes, but we go out and get good kids that are still pretty talented and try to get them to buy into what we do. And that's the biggest challenge is skipping over a guy that can probably help your team a ton athletically, but what has happened because you've talked to coaches, and I'm all about second chances. That's why I give these guys that sometimes have been out of school a while another chance. But, we try to get kids that are going to be a student and are going to go to class and then are going to buy into what we do.
Back here on set with Mickey Shaddricks and Gerhard Mathangani. We mentioned several of the local players in that interview, but here's a list of all the local players on the Gadsden State roster there. Chris English of Weaver, Tevin Weiss of Gadsden City, and guys, we recognize a lot of these names from covering basketball. Brad Robertson of Hoax Bluff, Sidney Scales of Talladega, Jalen Hill of White Plains, Dee Johnson from TCC, Brandon Williams from Mumford, and the practice player Nick Porter from Alexandria. And Mickey, being at that practice, we kind of got to see a preview of what this Gadsden State team is going to be like.
Yeah, if you like basketball locally, I really think that we wanted to bring a little more awareness to Gadsden State basketball right now because what's going on there is really unique. First of all, you do have a lot of local flavor on the roster. You saw the list of the local kids there. Really good basketball players that people remember from their high school days. Also, another really neat thing about what's going on at Gadsden State is the coaching staff. there's 3 of the 4 coaches are all from the Ginn family. And as we talked about in the interview, the last time Gadsden State made it to the big national tournament, Larry Ginn was playing back in the 60s. So you've got Todd, head coach, Will and Scott, unpaid assistants. They're there with him every time. And if Larry were still alive and could see his 3 sons working together, I think he'd be tickled to death. And I'm sure he sees it now from a different perspective. But it's really neat what's going on at Gadsden State. They had a good year last year. They've got a good team this year with a lot of local flavor. And credit to Todd and his staff for recruiting locally. If there's 2 kids out there and all things are even, they're going local.
And we mentioned those local guys. We've seen a lot of them in the Northeast Regionals and the county tournament. But they also branch out a little bit and get some players from out of town.
Yeah, and there's one point I want to make about this Gadsden State team. Coach Ginn was very excited about a young man they just recently got in from Minor. His name is Marcel Jackson. He's 6'6", and he is a point guard. He can do it all at 6'6". He won't be eligible till December. He's academically ineligible right now, but he'll be able to play in December. Coach Ginn told me that when he becomes eligible, forget their record at that point, there'll be a different basketball team. And, of course, that's when the real games begin anyway. We'll find out a lot about Gadsden State's early part of the schedule right away. They've got to go to Georgia Highlands to open the season on November the 7th. They finished 2nd in the country last year.
We're excited to see the Gadsden State basketball team this year, and we hope you keep up with them as well. Thanks to Coach Todd Ginn for sitting down with us here on the Locker Room. Stay with us. We're going to grab a timeout right now, but we got the Locker Room Roundtable and the Pick 6 still ahead. Stay with us. Back here in the Locker Room with Gerhard Mathangani and Mickey Shadracks. Time for the Locker Room Roundtable. And, guys, we talked about some of these things that happened in college football last week. Yeah. Steve Spurrier resigned and Sarkisian fired and Will Greer suspended. After you watched college football this past Saturday, how do you think that all panned out?
It's interesting to see the way the South Carolina players treated their new head coach after Steve Spurrier, and it was a situation, especially after the game and after the locker room. They beat Vanderbilt, and Vanderbilt lost to Western Kentucky earlier in the year. So it's not necessarily a huge win, but to see the way that team bounced back and that team embraced their new head coach, right. I think it was really, really interesting. Of course, we're talking about Michigan and Michigan State and all the crazy things that happened in that game. But one of the things that I really, really liked was the way South Carolina responded after Steve Spurrier.
It probably doesn't answer your question directly, but the takeaway I got from this past weekend is how wide open it is right now.
Yeah.
I still think Ohio State is probably the most talented and the team that has the highest ceiling on a given Saturday to play really, really well, but they're not doing it yet. And Alabama's emerging, and I'm telling you, Alabama's as good as anybody right now. It's just, but there's no really clear-cut favorite. There's really not even a clear-cut 4 to me.
Right.
So it's going to be really interesting the next few weeks.
Yeah.
A lot of unbeaten teams still, and a lot of unbeaten teams that could still make that 14 playoff.
Yeah. I think we've got a situation where we will guaranteed to have at least 1, maybe 2 unbeaten teams in that 14 playoff.
Let's move over to baseball now. Let's talk Chicago Cubs. In Back to the Future, they predicted the Cubs would be playing in the World Series in 2015. Is there a chance that the Cubs could be playing in a World Series, in the next 5 years?
Theo Epstein has built this team, and he built the Boston Red Sox team that broke the curse of the Bambino in 2004, won another championship in 2007. You got Joe Madden is now as their manager, who took Tampa to heights that they've never reached before. So I think it's not out of the realm of possibility that this Cubs team will win. Now, if it happens in 2015, I think everybody and their grandmothers will wish they bet just like the guy on Back to the Future bet the Cubs to win the World Series. But honestly, I think this team is good enough, young enough, and talented enough to win a World Championship pretty soon.
Well, my only thought on it is, if there are any Chicago Cubs fans out there in East Alabama, I would say this to you to encourage you. What's more likely, to come back from 3-0 or to get to the World Series, period?
Yeah.
So if you're going to get to the World Series as a Cubs fan, why not go this route?
And you got a Cubs fan sitting right to your right. And so hopefully this will happen. We'll keep our fingers crossed.
Let's talk a little NASCAR. It's race weekend at Talladega this weekend. A make-or-break week for Dale Jr.
Yeah, this is interesting. And this is the wild card race, and we've heard the chairman of Talladega Superspeedway, Grant Lynch, talk about this a million times. We've heard drivers talk about this a million times. This race is so perfectly placed in the chase. From 12 down to 8, and you have drivers on the outside looking in. Dale Jr. right now sitting in 11th. He has to win, and it's a place that he has won most recently back in the spring.
Right.
So I think it's interesting for him. It's interesting for guys like Jeff Gordon, who's running his last race at Talladega. A lot of interesting storylines, and we hope to see some of the big dogs roll through and get to the next round. But I'm really, really interested and excited about this one.
Yeah, everybody obviously is going to be looking at Dale Earnhardt Jr. to see what can happen there because he's the fan favorite here. But Gerhard mentioned his name. Jeff Gordon don't sleep on that story because Gordon is still alive.
Yeah.
Has he won this year? I don't think he's
I
won a
don't
race.
think so, yeah.
But he's still there, and he is tied with Junior as the all-time leader at this track in wins. This is the make or break race for him also.
Right.
We're excited to see at race weekend. I know I'll be out there covering some, so next week on the Primetime News you can catch some race coverage. Let's go back to college football now with our Pick Six, and let's take a look at these standings. It's gotten interesting here last week. Gerhard and I 4-2, Mickey 5-1, but look at the overall. We are all tied 23-7 overall for the three of us in the Pick Six. So let's take a look at this week's games. First off, Tennessee at Alabama.
Right before I make my pick, I'm going to apologize to all Cleveland County fans. I caught a lot of flack for this last week for my pick against Sachs. I will apologize for that pick. This pick, easy. It's Alabama. It's a big game for them, and I just think that they're peaking right now. They're hitting where their crescendo is. I like Alabama.
I said last week that when I picked against them that if they won, I wouldn't pick against them again, and unless something dramatically changes, I'm not. So put me down Alabama this week and beyond.
I'm going Alabama as well. Next up, JSU at Austin Peay.
Yeah, same situation as last week. JSU is just overmatched by this team in all facets of the game, barring even the craziest miracle Jacksonville State's going to win.
JSU.
Going JSU as well. Auburn, Arkansas.
This is an interesting game. Arkansas is a 5-point favorite by Vegas. They're a 2-win team, but they've played a really tough schedule. I think Arkansas keeps it close, but Auburn right now, they found what they need right now. They found what they need in Sean White. I think Auburn gets the win.
Two things Auburn needed to have a chance here. They needed the early start. They got it. They didn't need the rain. I think they needed a dry track for their speed to help them out. Doesn't look like they're going to get it. Last time I checked the weather, Arkansas is going to run the ball down their throat. I don't think Auburn has a chance.
I'm going Arkansas on this one as well. Next, Clemson, Miami.
Interesting one, because we've been waiting for Clemson to pull that Clemson. This is an 11 o'clock game at Miami. I just think that things will happen in this game, and Miami will find a way to win. Coming off a big win over Virginia Tech last week, 30-20. I think Miami will find a way to make it close at the end and pull it away with a win.
It's kind of hard for me to admit this, but I think Clemson's better than I thought they were. I'm going Clemson here.
I'm going Clemson in this one too. Next up, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, big SEC game.
Ole Miss lost last week at Memphis, and that's the game that you have your eye on as you're looking to forward to this game. But there's something about A&M when they play on the road. They're not the same team as they play when they're in College Station. I do like Texas A&M reluctantly. I'm going to go with the Aggies, but it's one of those where I'm not confident in it whatsoever.
I don't know who Ole Miss is. The only thing I like for them about this game is they're at home at night. They could look totally different in this game. But I'm going to go A&M also.
I'm going to go Ole Miss in this one. I think they're going to come back from that terrible loss last week and come back and beat Texas A&M. Gerhard, you'll be at this one. Oxford, Chelsea, our game of the week.
Oh.
Who you got?
Oxford's 3-5 this season. They've played two of the best teams in all Class A, 6A football. You take away the Opelika game and the Ben Russell game, they're 2-1, and they're outscoring their opponents 80-45. Mm-hmm. Now, on paper, I think Chelsea's a better team, but I think Oxford, just like last week or 2 weeks ago against Pell City, found a way to win the game they must win. They'll do the same this week at home.
I was sure hoping Pell City would help Oxford out last week, but it didn't happen. I'm going to go Oxford at home.
I'm going to take Oxford in this one as well. And for the score and highlights of that game, tune into the Pigskin Roundup this Friday night. Of course, you will have all the local scores and highlights. We'll be out at Jacksonville, Weaver, Coosa Christian, Talladega, Cleburne County, and more. Cherokee County head coach Trip Curry and Glencoe head coach Lee Osment will be in studio. And remember, check us out on Facebook and Twitter and hashtag Pigskin Roundup. Thanks so much for joining us this week on the show. We'll be back next week with more in the locker room.